You know what they say about best friends stealing your man? It's supposed to be impossible, right? Well, let me tell you how I became living proof that marrying her dad and becoming her stepmom was the perfect fucking solution. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind to the moment my entire world imploded like a badly built house of cards. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, and I watched it fall in slow motion. That stupid ceramic piece with "World's Best Friend" printed on the side that Jenna had given me last Christmas. The irony wasn't lost on me as it shattered against my kitchen floor, brown liquid spreading like a stain across the white tiles. Just like my trust was spreading across the metaphorical floor of my life. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson's voice ramble on about what she'd seen through her bedroom window. The words kept echoing in my skull like a broken record. Your boyfriend, and your best friend, and in his car, and definitely not just talking. My heart was doing this weird stuttering thing, like it couldn't decide whether to race or stop completely. You know that feeling when you're on a roller coaster right before the big drop? That stomach-lurching moment when gravity hasn't quite kicked in yet, but you know you're about to plummet? That was my entire nervous system right then. I thanked Mrs. Patterson, God bless nosy neighbors, and hung up, staring at my reflection in the black phone screen. My face looked pale, almost ghostly, and my brown eyes seemed too wide for my head. Like I was seeing myself for the first time and realizing I was a fucking idiot. 3 years. 3 goddamn years I'd been with Marcus. 3 years of believing his late nights were about his demanding job at the marketing firm. 3 years of trusting Jenna when she said she was totally supportive of our relationship and thought Marcus was perfect for me. 3 years of planning a future with someone who was apparently getting very acquainted with my best friend's tonsils in the back seat of his Honda Civic. The rage started as a tiny spark somewhere behind my ribcage, like a pilot light that had just been ignited. I could feel it growing, feeding on every memory that was now taking on a completely different meaning. All those times Jenna had asked detailed questions about Marcus, where we were going, what we were doing, when I'd be home. All those times she'd volunteered to keep me company when Marcus was working late, showing up with wine and concerned questions about our relationship. Jesus Christ, I was such a naive little lamb. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my phone, looking for evidence I'd been too trusting to notice before. And there it was, hiding in plain sight like a neon sign I'd somehow been blind to. Text messages between Marcus and Jay that I'd glimpsed over his shoulder and assumed were about work. Late-night phone calls he'd taken in the other room, claiming it was his boss. That time last month when both he and Jenna had food poisoning on the same day and couldn't make it to my birthday dinner. Food poisoning. Right. They were probably too busy poisoning my relationship to show up. I sat down heavily on my couch, the same couch where the 3 of us had watched movies together, where Jenna had cried on my shoulder about her latest breakup just 2 weeks ago. The cushions still smelled like her vanilla perfume, and suddenly that scent made me want to vomit. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, though that felt like being gutted with a rusty spoon. The worst part was realizing how long I'd been living in this carefully constructed lie. How many times had they laughed about me behind my back? How many times had they shared knowing looks while I babbled on about wedding plans or the cute thing Marcus had done that morning? I felt like such an idiot, such a pathetic, trusting, blind idiot. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Working late again tonight, babe. Don't wait up." The fucking audacity. I stared at those words until they blurred together, my vision going watery with a combination of fury and humiliation. Another buzz. This one from Jenna. "Movie night tomorrow? I need to tell you about this guy I'm seeing. It's complicated." Complicated? Yeah, I bet it was fucking complicated, considering the guy she was seeing was my boyfriend. The pilot light in my chest roared into a full bonfire. My skin felt hot and tight, like I was running a fever, and there was this metallic taste in my mouth that I recognized from the time I'd been in a car accident. Pure adrenaline mixed with shock. I stood up abruptly, pacing across my living room like a caged animal. Every step felt deliberate, purposeful, even though I had no idea what I was going to do. The rational part of my brain, the part that had been happily planning my future with Marcus just an hour ago, was screaming at me to calm down, to think this through, to have a mature conversation like a grown adult. But the other part of my brain, the part that was currently running the show, had different ideas. That part was cataloging every humiliation, every lie, every moment I'd felt like something was off, but had convinced myself I was being paranoid. That part wanted blood. I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror, studying my reflection like I was seeing myself for the first time. Brown hair that Marcus said he loved, brown eyes that Jenna always complimented, the face of someone who'd apparently been the punchline to a joke she wasn't in on. But as I stood there, something shifted. The hurt was still there, throbbing like a fresh wound, but underneath it was something else, something colder and more calculating. If they wanted to play games, I could play games. If they wanted to make me look like a fool, well, two could play at that particular sport. I thought about Jenna's dad, Richard. 52 years old, recently divorced, successful as hell, and, if I was being honest, still pretty damn attractive for a guy his age. I'd met him a dozen times over the years at family gatherings and graduation parties. He was always polite, always asked about my job, always seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Unlike his daughter, apparently, who was more interested in what my boyfriend had to say. Richard had mentioned during Jenna's birthday party last month that he was thinking about getting back into dating. Said he was lonely in that big house, now that the divorce was final and Jenna was living in her own apartment. Lonely, successful, available, and he'd be the perfect weapon for the most beautifully twisted revenge I could imagine. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt, and I actually laughed out loud, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed off my bathroom tiles. It was so perfect, so deliciously appropriate, that it almost felt like fate was handing me the tools for my own justice. Marcus and Jenna thought they were so clever, sneaking around behind my back like teenagers. They probably thought I'd never find out, or that if I did, I'd just cry and fade away quietly. They'd underestimated me completely, but they had no idea what I was capable of when properly motivated. I walked back to my living room, my steps steadier now, my hands no longer shaking. The broken coffee mug was still scattered across my kitchen floor, but I didn't clean it up. Let it stay there as a reminder of the moment everything changed. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Richard's number. He'd given it to me last year when I'd mentioned needing a recommendation for a contractor, said to call him anytime if I needed help with anything. Well, I definitely needed help with something now. My finger hovered over his name, my heart still racing, but for entirely different reasons now. This wasn't panic anymore. This was anticipation. The pilot light had become a full-blown inferno, and I was ready to watch the whole fucking world burn. I didn't call Richard that night. Not because I was having second thoughts, hell no, but because revenge is like a fine wine. It needs time to breathe, to develop complexity, to reach its full potential. And I wanted this to be fucking vintage. Instead, I spent the evening doing what any rational person would do after discovering their boyfriend was cheating with their best friend. I stalked the shit out of both of them on social media while eating ice cream straight from the container and mentally planning the most elaborate revenge scheme of my adult life. Marcus's Instagram was a treasure trove of evidence I'd been too trusting to notice. All those work dinners and client meetings suddenly made sense when I cross-referenced the timestamps with Jenna's posts. There was a photo of her at some fancy restaurant downtown from 3 weeks ago, and Marcus had posted a blurry shot of his business dinner the same night. Same fucking restaurant. Same fucking time. The rage felt different now. Less raw, more refined, like it had settled into my bones and become part of my DNA. I could feel it humming under my skin, a constant low-frequency vibration that reminded me why I was doing this. By morning, I had a plan. Not just any plan, a masterpiece of psychological warfare that would make Sun Tzu weep with pride. The beauty of targeting Richard wasn't just the obvious irony of becoming Jenna's stepmother. It was the layers of perfect revenge baked into every aspect of this scheme. Richard was successful, attractive, and, according to Jenna's endless complaints over the years, desperate for her approval and love. She'd spent our entire friendship bitching about how her dad worked too much, how he never understood her, how he always dated women who were too young or totally wrong for him. Well, I was about to become the wrongest woman possible. I spent 3 days researching Richard like I was writing a doctoral thesis on his life. LinkedIn told me about his architectural firm, his recent projects, his professional accomplishments. Facebook showed me his hobbies: hiking, wine tasting, classic cars. Instagram revealed his aesthetic preferences: clean lines, modern design, artisanal everything. More importantly, I dove deep into what Jenna had told me about him over the years. The man was a devoted father who'd practically raised Jenna single-handedly after her mom died when she was 12. He'd sacrificed his social life to make sure she had everything she needed. He'd paid for her college, her first apartment, her car. And how did she repay him? By constantly criticizing his life choices and treating him like an ATM with daddy issues. Perfect. A man who valued loyalty and family above everything else. This was going to be easier than I thought. The psychological profile I was building painted a picture of someone who was probably lonely as hell and starving for genuine appreciation. Someone who'd spent decades putting his daughter first, only to have her treat him like an embarrassment. Someone who'd probably love to meet a woman who actually saw his worth. Someone exactly like me. Or at least, exactly like the version of me I was about to become. I started laying the groundwork on a Thursday morning. Nothing dramatic, just a casual text mentioning that I'd heard about a new coffee shop downtown that specialized in the single-origin Ethiopian beans he'd mentioned loving at Jenna's birthday party. Did he have any recommendations for someone looking to expand her coffee horizons? His response came back within an hour, detailed, enthusiastic, and clearly written by someone who was thrilled that another human being was interested in his opinion. He suggested meeting for coffee that weekend to do a proper tasting. Hook, line, and sinker. But as I sat there staring at his text, something unexpected happened. A tiny voice in the back of my head, the same voice that had been telling me to be reasonable and take the high road for the past week, started whispering doubts. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to manipulate a perfectly nice man just to get revenge on his daughter? The answer came to me as another text from Marcus popped up. Late night again. This project is killing me. Yes, I was absolutely going to do this. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt in the moment. It rewrites your entire history. Every happy memory becomes suspect. Every moment of trust becomes evidence of your own stupidity. Every plan you made for the future becomes a joke you weren't in on. Marcus and Jenna had stolen more than just 3 years of my life. They'd stolen my ability to trust my own judgment. They'd made me question every instinct, every feeling, every moment when I'd thought something felt off, but convinced myself I was being paranoid. They'd made me feel like an idiot, and that was unforgivable. So no, I wasn't going to take the high road. The high road was for people who hadn't been humiliated by the two people they trusted most in the world. The high road was for people who could walk away and start fresh without feeling like they'd been played for a fool. I was taking the scenic route through hell, and I was going to enjoy every fucking mile of it. The coffee date was set for Saturday afternoon at Grind Coffee, a place downtown that Richard described as having the best Ethiopian yirgacheffe this side of Addis Ababa. I spent Friday evening preparing like I was going into battle, because in a way, I was. I researched Ethiopian coffee until I could speak intelligently about flavor profiles and roasting techniques. I practiced looking fascinated by architectural discussions. I even watched YouTube videos about classic car restoration, because Richard's Instagram suggested he was restoring a 1967 Mustang in his spare time. But the most important part of my preparation wasn't intellectual, it was psychological. I had to become the kind of woman Richard would fall for, and that meant understanding exactly what he'd been missing in his life. Based on everything Jenna had told me over the years, Richard had spent 2 decades in a marriage with a woman who took him for granted. He'd worked his ass off to build a successful business while she spent his money and complained about his long hours. After she died, he'd thrown himself into raising Jenna, only to watch her grow up into someone who seemed ashamed of him. He was a man who'd been underappreciated for most of his adult life, a man who probably craved genuine interest in his passions, real conversation about his work, authentic enthusiasm for the things that mattered to him. I could be that woman. Hell, I could be better than that woman, because I'd be doing it with purpose and intention instead of just stumbling through a relationship hoping for the best. Saturday morning, I stood in front of my closet like a general preparing for war. This wasn't about looking hot, though I definitely wanted to look good. This was about crafting an image. I needed to look sophisticated but not intimidating, interested but not desperate, put together but not high maintenance. I settled on dark jeans, a cream-colored sweater that brought out my eyes, and boots that suggested I was practical but still cared about style. Minimal makeup, hair in loose waves, jewelry that looked expensive but not flashy. The overall effect was, woman who has her shit together and isn't trying too hard to impress you. Perfect. As I walked into Grind Coffee, I spotted Richard immediately. He was sitting at a corner table with 2 steaming cups in front of him, scrolling through his phone with the slightly awkward posture of a man who wasn't entirely sure this was a good idea. God, he was exactly what I remembered. Salt and pepper hair that was obviously well maintained, laugh lines around green eyes that were probably beautiful when he smiled, broad shoulders that suggested he still hit the gym regularly. He was wearing a navy button-down and khakis, the uniform of a successful man who didn't quite know how to dress for a casual coffee date. He looked up as I approached, and his face broke into a genuine smile that made something twist in my chest. Not attraction, not yet anyway, but recognition. This was a man who was genuinely happy to see me. When was the last time Marcus had looked at me like that? The thought of Marcus sent a fresh wave of determination through my system. This wasn't about Richard, not really. This was about justice. This was about showing Marcus and Jenna that they'd fucked with the wrong person. Richard stood as I reached the table, and I noticed he was taller than I remembered, probably 6'2" to my 5'6". He gestured to the cups with obvious pride. I could see him explaining the coffee, his eyes lighting up as he talked about flavor notes and brewing methods. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself genuinely interested despite the fact that I was here under completely false pretenses. That was the moment I realized Richard might be more dangerous to my plan than I'd anticipated. Not because he was difficult to manipulate, the opposite, actually. He was so genuinely likable, so authentically passionate about the things he cared about, that I could feel myself responding to him as a person rather than just a weapon in my revenge plot. But I pushed that thought aside. Richard was collateral damage, nothing more. He'd probably enjoy our relationship while it lasted, and when it was over, he'd move on. Meanwhile, Jenna would be stuck with the knowledge that her best friend had become her stepmother, and Marcus would be stuck with a cheating girlfriend who'd probably cheat on him too. Everyone would get exactly what they deserved. As Richard continued talking about coffee, I found myself studying his hands. They were working hands, scarred and calloused from his years in construction before he started his architectural firm. These were hands that built things, created things, made the world more beautiful. Unlike Marcus, whose hands were soft and smooth from pushing papers around an office all day while lying to his girlfriend. Unlike Jenna, whose hands had never created anything more substantial than drama and betrayal. I realized Richard had stopped talking and was looking at me with concern. I must have zoned out for a moment, lost in my comparative analysis of hands and what they said about character. I refocused on the present, on the man sitting across from me who was clearly worried he'd been boring me with coffee talk. The vulnerability in his expression was almost painful to witness. Here was a man who'd been dismissed and underappreciated for so long that he automatically assumed he'd done something wrong. Time to put my plan into action. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes bright with genuine interest, and asked him to tell me more about the difference between washed and natural processing methods. His face lit up like Christmas morning, and I knew I had him. The coffee date stretched into 3 hours. 3 hours of Richard talking about his work, his hobbies, his dreams for retirement. 3 hours of me asking thoughtful questions and offering insights that made him laugh. 3 hours of building the foundation for the most elaborate revenge scheme I'd ever conceived. And if I occasionally forgot that this was all an act, if I occasionally found myself genuinely charmed by his stories about Jenna's childhood or impressed by his passion for sustainable architecture, well, that just made me better at the role I was playing. By the time we parted ways, I had his number, a standing invitation to see his car restoration project, and the absolute certainty that Richard was already half in love with the idea of me. Phase 1, complete. Now came the really fun part. The next 3 weeks unfolded like a masterclass in psychological manipulation, and I was getting straight A's. Richard and I fell into a rhythm that felt almost dangerously natural. Coffee dates that turned into lunch dates, that turned into dinner dates, that turned into long conversations on his front porch while he showed me the progress on his Mustang. The man was like a fucking golden retriever, eager, loyal, grateful for any attention, and completely unaware that he was being played. Except the more time I spent with him, the less it felt like playing. That was the part of my plan I hadn't accounted for. Richard wasn't just a means to an end, he was actually nice, really nice. The kind of nice that made you remember why you used to believe in good people before the world taught you better. He brought me flowers from his garden, actual flowers he'd grown himself, not some generic bouquet from the grocery store. He remembered that I'd mentioned loving old movies and showed up with a collection of Hitchcock films and homemade popcorn. He listened when I talked about my job at the marketing agency, asked follow-up questions, offered advice that was actually helpful instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. It was everything Marcus had never been, and that realization made me hate Marcus even more. Meanwhile, Marcus and Jenna were apparently getting bolder with their affair. Marcus's late nights were becoming more frequent, and his excuses were getting lazier. Client emergency, server down, team building event? The man was running out of corporate buzzwords to explain why he couldn't be bothered to come home to his girlfriend of 3 years. Jenna was even worse. She kept texting me about this mysterious new guy she was seeing, dropping hints about how complicated it was and how she couldn't wait for me to meet him. The fucking audacity was breathtaking. She was literally asking me to be excited about her stealing my boyfriend. But every time I felt my resolve wavering, every time I started to think maybe I should just dump Marcus and move on with my life, one of them would do something that reminded me exactly why they deserved what was coming. Like the night I came home early from dinner with Richard to find Marcus's car in my driveway and the lights off in my apartment. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching my own bedroom window, seeing shadows move behind the curtains. They were fucking in my bed, using my sheets, my pillows, my space to carry on their sordid little affair. That night, I didn't just want revenge. I wanted annihilation. I started moving faster with Richard. Nothing too obvious. I wasn't going to throw myself at him like some desperate college girl. But I began sharing more personal stories, letting my guard down in carefully calculated ways, creating the illusion of intimacy that would make him feel special and chosen. I told him about my childhood, about growing up with parents who fought constantly before they divorced when I was 16, about how hard it had been to trust people after watching my family fall apart, about how rare it was to meet someone who felt safe and steady and real. None of it was technically a lie. I really had grown up in a broken home. I really did have trust issues, and Richard really did feel safe and steady, which was probably the most dangerous thing about this whole situation. Because somewhere between the coffee dates and the classic car restoration lessons and the late-night conversations about everything and nothing, I'd started to care about him. Not enough to call off my revenge plot. Hell no, I was in too deep for that. But enough to feel genuinely guilty about what I was doing to him. The guilt was manageable, though. Every time it threatened to derail my plans, I'd get another text from Marcus about working late, or another message from Jenna about her complicated relationship, and the guilt would transform back into cold, calculating fury. Besides, I told myself, Richard was getting something out of this too. For the first time in years, he had someone who appreciated him, someone who listened to his stories and laughed at his jokes and made him feel like he mattered. Even if it was based on a lie, the happiness was real. And the happiness was real. I could see it in the way his shoulders relaxed when I walked into a room, in the way his eyes lit up when I asked about his latest project, in the way he'd started humming while he worked on his car. Richard was falling in love, and love looked good on him. It would have been touching if it wasn't part of my elaborate plan to destroy his daughter's life. 3 weeks in, Richard invited me to dinner at his house. Not takeout or a casual meal, he wanted to cook for me. He spent the entire day preparing some elaborate Italian dish he'd learned from YouTube, setting the table with actual cloth napkins and candles, even putting together a playlist of music he thought I'd like. The effort was heartbreaking and perfect, and exactly what I needed to move into the next phase of my plan. His house was exactly what I'd expected: clean, modern, expensive, but not showy. The kind of place that whispered success rather than screaming it. Every piece of furniture looked like it had been chosen with care. Every room was perfectly organized. Every surface was dust-free. It was the home of a man who'd built something beautiful and had no one to share it with. Until now, dinner was actually amazing. Richard had outdone himself with homemade pasta and some kind of wine that probably cost more than my rent. But the best part wasn't the food. It was watching him watching me eat it. He was so nervous, so eager for my approval, so desperate to make the evening perfect. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. After dinner, he gave me the full tour. His home office with architectural drawings covering every surface. The guest room he'd converted into a workshop for his car restoration hobby. The master bedroom with the king-size bed and the view of his perfectly manicured backyard. And then, because Richard was a gentleman from a different era, he walked me to the door without making a single move. No attempted kiss, no suggestion that I stay the night, no pressure of any kind. Just a soft, "I had a wonderful time," and a question about whether I'd like to do it again soon. That's when I made my move. I turned back to him, stepped closer, let my hand rest on his chest, and kissed him. Nothing dramatic or passionate, just a soft, sweet kiss that lasted exactly long enough to make him believe it was spontaneous and heartfelt rather than strategically planned. His reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Surprise, then pleasure, then this soft, wondering expression like he couldn't quite believe this was happening to him. He kissed me back gently, carefully, like I was something precious he was afraid to break. When we finally pulled apart, he looked at me with such genuine affection that something twisted in my chest. But I pushed the feeling down and smiled at him instead. "I should go," I said, and he nodded, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. Like he was afraid this had all been too good to be true and I was about to disappear. "I'd like that," I told him and meant it. The next morning, I woke up to texts from both Marcus and Jenna. Marcus was canceling our plans for the weekend, another work crisis. Jenna wanted to have lunch so she could tell me more about her mysterious boyfriend. Perfect timing. I met Jenna at our usual spot, a trendy little cafe downtown where she could see and be seen. She was already there when I arrived, practically vibrating with excitement, her blonde hair freshly styled and her makeup done like she was going to a photo shoot instead of a casual lunch. She looked guilty as hell, and she didn't even know it. "Oh my God, finally," she said as I sat down. "I've been dying to talk to you about this guy I'm seeing." I arranged my face into an expression of interested curiosity. "Tell me everything. You've been so mysterious about him." And she did. Holy shit, did she ever tell me everything? She talked for 20 minutes straight about how amazing Marcus was, how different he was from other guys she'd dated, how mature and successful and funny he was. She described their dates I now realized were happening on the same nights Marcus was supposedly working late. She talked about how good the sex was, how he made her feel special, how she thought this might be the one. The whole time she used his name. Marcus this, Marcus that. She talked about my boyfriend of 3 years like he was some exciting new discovery she'd made, like she was the first person to ever appreciate his wonderful qualities. She didn't mention that he was taken. She didn't mention that he was my boyfriend. She didn't mention that she was destroying the life of her best friend, the woman sitting across from her nodding and smiling and acting happy for her. I sat there listening to her gush about my boyfriend while mentally adding charges to the indictment I was building against both of them. Betrayal, deception, theft, emotional terrorism. And now, sitting here listening to her talk about Marcus like he was hers, I could add another charge, complete and utter delusion. "The only problem," she said, finally taking a breath, "is that it's complicated. He's in a relationship." There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. "Oh," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "That is complicated." I know," she said quickly. "I'm not usually the other woman. But this is different. He's not happy with her. He says she doesn't understand him, that they've grown apart, that he's only staying with her because it's easier than dealing with a breakup right now. Classic cheater bullshit. I'd heard those exact words from guys trying to pick me up in bars. "She doesn't understand me. We're basically roommates. I'm going to leave her soon." The greatest hits of infidelity. But hearing Jenna repeat them like gospel, like Marcus was some tortured romantic hero instead of a lying piece of shit, made me want to reach across the table and slap her. Instead, I leaned forward with concern. "Are you sure you want to get involved in that? I mean, if he's willing to cheat on her, what makes you think he won't cheat on you?" She waved off my concern like I was being silly. "It's not like that. This is real. He's going to break up with her soon. He just needs to find the right time. He doesn't want to hurt her unnecessarily. Because apparently, carrying on a 3-month affair was the gentle, considerate way to end a relationship. Besides," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "she's kind of boring. He says she's nice enough, but there's no spark anymore. No excitement. He needs someone who challenges him, you know? Boring. That's what they thought of me. 3 years of my life, 3 years of loving Marcus and supporting his dreams and being faithful and loyal and true, and I was boring. The rage was so pure, so crystalline, that it was almost beautiful. It burned away any remaining guilt I might have felt about what I was doing to Richard. These people deserved everything that was coming to them. Well, I said carefully. "I hope you know what you're doing. Just be careful, okay?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're such a good friend. I'm so lucky to have you." The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. After lunch, I went straight to Richard's house. He was in his garage working on the Mustang, wearing old jeans and a t-shirt that was tight enough to show off the fact that he definitely didn't skip leg day. His hands were covered in grease, and there was a smudge of oil on his cheek that somehow made him look younger and more approachable. He looked up when I walked in, and his entire face lit up. "Hey, beautiful. I wasn't expecting you until tonight. Beautiful." When was the last time Marcus had called me beautiful? When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Richard was looking at me right now, like I was the best part of his day? "I missed you," I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. He wiped his hands on a shop rag and walked over to me, pulling me into a hug that smelled like motor oil and expensive cologne. He kissed the top of my head, and I could feel some of the tension from lunch with Jenna melting away. "Give me 10 minutes to clean up," he said, "and then I'm all yours." While he was in the house washing the grease off his hands, I wandered around his garage, looking at the tools and car parts and photos he had pinned to a corkboard. Most of them were of Jenna: graduation photos, vacation pictures, candid shots of her laughing or making faces at the camera. The photos spanned years, chronicling her transformation from a chubby-cheeked kid to the backstabbing adult she'd become. In every single photo, Richard was beaming with pride. This was a man who worshipped his daughter, who'd built his entire world around making her happy, and she repaid him by treating him like an embarrassment and a bank account. She had no idea what she was about to lose. Richard came back cleaned up and smelling like soap instead of motor oil. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder, both of us looking at the photos of Jenna. "She's beautiful," I said, because it was true, and because I knew it was what he wanted to hear. "She gets that from her mother," he said softly. "But she's got my stubborn streak. Always has to do things the hard way." If only he knew how hard things were about to get. "Tell me about her," I said, turning in his arms to face him. "I want to know everything about the people who matter to you." And he did. For the next hour, Richard told me stories about raising Jenna as a single father, about dance recitals and soccer games and parent-teacher conferences, about teaching her to drive and helping her with homework and staying up all night when she had the flu, about working extra hours to pay for her college and her apartment and her car, sacrificing his own social life to make sure she had everything she needed. The love in his voice was unmistakable, and it made what I was about to do feel both more justified and more cruel. Jenna didn't deserve a father like Richard, but Richard deserved to know what kind of person his daughter really was. "She sounds amazing," I lied. "I'd love to meet her sometime." "I'd like that," Richard said. "Though I should warn you, she can be a little protective. She's never really approved of anyone I've dated." "Protective?" "Right. More like possessive and controlling and threatened by the idea of anyone else mattering to her father." "I'm sure we'll get along great," I said, smiling up at him. "After all, we both care about you." 3 days later, I was ready for the next phase of my plan. I'd spent the weekend at Richard's house, not sleeping over, but spending long days together that ended with increasingly passionate makeout sessions on his couch. We were right at the edge of taking things to the next level, and I could see in his eyes that he was falling hard and fast. It was time to let Marcus and Jenna know they weren't the only ones with secrets. I started small. A photo on Instagram of Richard and me at dinner, tagged at a restaurant I knew Jenna followed. A casual mention to Marcus that I'd been spending time with a friend when he asked about my weekend. A few strategic posts about how nice it was to be with someone who actually appreciated me. Neither of them took the bait. Marcus was too wrapped up in his affair to pay attention to my social media, and Jenna was too self-absorbed to notice that her best friend might be dating someone. So I escalated. I posted a picture of Richard's hands working on the Mustang, with a caption about how attractive it was to watch a man create something beautiful. I checked in at his architectural firm when I brought him lunch. I shared a photo of the flowers from his garden, gushing about how thoughtful he was. Still nothing. They were so wrapped up in their own drama that they were completely oblivious to mine. Time for the nuclear option. I waited until a Thursday night when I knew Marcus was supposed to be working late. Again. Then I posted a photo of Richard and me in his backyard, sitting close together on his patio furniture, his arm around my shoulders, and both of us laughing at something off camera. We looked happy. We looked like a couple. The caption read, "Sometimes the best things come when you're not looking for them." Within an hour, my phone started buzzing with notifications, comments from friends asking who the mystery man was, likes from people I barely knew. And then, finally, the message I'd been waiting for. Jenna. OMG, who is this? He's gorgeous. Why didn't you tell me you were seeing someone? I stared at her message for a long moment, savoring the moment. She had no idea. She was looking at a photo of her own father and complimenting his looks without even recognizing him. The irony was so perfect it almost felt like poetry. I typed back, just someone I've been spending time with. It's still new, but I really like him. Can't wait for you to meet him. Smile. Her response came back immediately. Yes. We should double date. Me and Marcus, you and Mystery Man. Marcus and Jenna, double dating with me and Richard. My cheating boyfriend and backstabbing best friend, sharing a table with me and the father of one of them. It was so beautiful, so perfectly twisted, that I actually laughed out loud. I'd love that. I typed back. Let me talk to him and see when he's free. The trap was set. All I had to do now was spring it. The double date was scheduled for Friday night at Meridian, one of those upscale restaurants where the portions are tiny, but the prices make your credit card weep. Perfect for the kind of evening that would end with someone's entire world imploding in spectacular fashion. I spent the entire week leading up to it in a state of barely contained excitement. It was like waiting for Christmas morning. If Christmas morning involved watching your cheating boyfriend and backstabbing best friend discover that karma was a bitch with excellent planning skills. Richard was nervous about meeting my friends. He kept asking questions about them, wanting to make a good impression, worried that he might not fit in with people my age. If only he knew that one of my friends was about to discover she'd been fucking someone else's boyfriend while gushing to that someone about how amazing the sex was. And that my other friend was about to meet his girlfriend's father and realize his secret affair wasn't so secret anymore. What if they don't like me? Richard asked as we got ready at his house. He'd changed shirts 3 times and was currently agonizing over whether his tie was too formal for dinner with people in their 20s. Trust me, I said, adjusting his collar and admiring how the navy blue brought out his eyes. This is going to be a night none of us will ever forget. I wasn't lying, not even a little bit. I'd chosen my outfit as carefully as a general choosing weapons for battle. A black dress that was elegant but not overdressed, sophisticated but not intimidating, with just enough cleavage to remind everyone that I was a woman worth fighting for. My hair was pulled back in a sleek updo that showed off the earrings Richard had given me last week, small diamonds that caught the light when I moved. I looked like someone who belonged on the arm of a successful, attractive older man. I looked like someone who was winning. We arrived at Meridian at exactly 7 o'clock. Marcus and Jenna were already there, sitting at a corner table and looking like the picture of young love. Marcus had his arm draped casually over the back of Jenna's chair, and she was leaning into him like they were posing for a magazine spread about beautiful couples. The sight of them together, so comfortable and confident in their deception, sent a fresh wave of determination through my system. They looked up as Richard and I approached the table, and I watched their faces carefully for the moment of recognition. Marcus saw us first, and I caught the exact second when his brain processed what he was seeing. His face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, recognition, shock, and then something that looked suspiciously like panic. Jenna was slower on the uptake. She was smiling and starting to stand up to greet us when she really looked at Richard for the first time. I watched her freeze, watched her eyes widen, watched her mouth fall open in a way that would have been comical if I wasn't so busy savoring every second of her shock. "Marcus, Jenna," I said smoothly, "I'd like you to meet Richard." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Marcus was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, like he was seeing me for the first time and realizing he'd vastly underestimated what I was capable of. Jenna was staring at her father with the kind of horror usually reserved for natural disasters or tax audits. Richard, bless his oblivious heart, stepped forward with his hand extended and his best smile. "It's so nice to finally meet you both. I've heard so much about you." The irony was fucking beautiful. Marcus recovered first, probably because he had years of practice lying and pretending. He stood up and shook Richard's hand, his smile just a little too bright, his voice just a little too loud. "Richard! Great to meet you, man. This is unexpected." "Dad?" Jenna's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Oh, this was even better than I'd imagined. The look on her face as the pieces started falling into place was worth every minute I'd spent planning this moment. I could practically see the gears turning in her head as she tried to process the fact that her best friend was on a date with her father. "Jenna!" Richard's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "What a wonderful surprise. I had no idea you and—" He looked between Jenna and me, clearly delighted by what he assumed was an amazing coincidence. "Wait, you two know each other?" "We're best friends," I said, my voice perfectly innocent. "Isn't that incredible?" "What are the odds?" The odds were exactly what I'd calculated them to be, but Richard didn't need to know that. Marcus was still staring at me like I'd grown a second head, but I could see his analytical mind working through the implications. He was a smart guy, manipulative and dishonest, but smart. He was starting to realize that this wasn't a coincidence. This was something else entirely. Jenna looked like she was about to vomit. Her face had gone pale, and she was gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "You're dating my dad?" She managed to get out. "For about a month now," I said cheerfully. "He's amazing, Jenna. You're so lucky to have him as a father." I sat down next to Richard, who was still beaming like this was the best possible turn of events. He put his hand on my knee under the table, a gesture that was both possessive and protective. I leaned into him slightly, playing the part of the devoted girlfriend. Marcus sat down heavily, his lawyer brain clearly working overtime to figure out how fucked he was. Jenna remained standing, looking like she was caught between fleeing the restaurant and demanding answers. "Sit down, sweetheart," Richard said gently. "This is wonderful. I get to have dinner with my daughter and my—" He paused, looking at me with soft eyes. "My girlfriend. And her friend Marcus. Girlfriend." The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Richard said it with such warmth, such obvious affection, that I almost felt guilty for the way I was using him. Almost. Jenna finally sat down, her movements mechanical and stiff. She kept staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock, betrayal, horror, and something that might have been fear. "So," Marcus said, clearly trying to regain control of the situation, "how did you two meet?" His voice was carefully casual, but I could hear the undertone of panic. He was starting to understand that this wasn't just awkward, this was dangerous. "Coffee shop downtown," Richard answered readily. She asked for recommendations on Ethiopian beans, and we ended up talking for hours. He squeezed my knee under the table. I knew right away she was special. "Special," Jenna repeated faintly. "Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" she said suddenly. "Alone?" "Of course, sweetheart." Richard started to stand, but I put my hand on his arm. "Actually," I said, "before you do that, there's something I think everyone should know." I looked directly at Marcus, who had gone very still. "About honesty. And trust. And being truthful with the people you care about." The temperature at the table seemed to drop by about 10 degrees. Marcus's face was carefully blank, but I could see the muscle in his jaw twitching. Jenna looked like she was about to hyperventilate. "I think," I continued, my voice still perfectly pleasant, "that we should all put our cards on the table. Don't you think, Marcus?" He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing his options. Deny everything and hope I was bluffing? Come clean and try to control the narrative? Cut his losses and run? "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. "Wrong choice." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. "Mrs. Patterson has really excellent eyesight for someone her age," I said conversationally. "And she's very observant." "Very detail-oriented?" Marcus went white. "She noticed that you've been spending a lot of time in your car lately," I continued. "Parked in front of my apartment building. With a passenger. A blonde passenger." Jenna made a small choking sound. "She also noticed," I said, my voice getting slightly sharper, "that this blonde passenger looked remarkably similar to my best friend Jenna." Richard looked confused. "I don't understand." 3 months, I said, looking directly at Jenna. "That's how long you've been fucking my boyfriend. 3 months of lying to my face. 3 months of pretending to be my friend while you were screwing Marcus in his car, in my apartment, in my bed." The words hung in the air like toxic gas. Richard's face went through the same series of expressions I'd watched on Marcus and Jenna. Confusion, understanding, and then something darker. 3 months, I repeated, of listening to you talk about your mysterious new guy while you described my boyfriend's dick. 3 months of Marcus telling me he was working late while he was actually working on getting into your pants. "Jesus Christ," Marcus said under his breath. "Did you think I was stupid?" I asked, my voice getting louder. "Did you think I'd never find out?" Did you think you could just take whatever you wanted from me and I'd never notice? Jenna was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks in black rivers. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? I snapped. Were you planning to wait until after my wedding to tell me you'd been fucking my fiancé? Richard's hand had gone very still on my knee. When I looked at him, his face was harder than I'd ever seen it. The gentle, sweet man I'd been dating for the past month had been replaced by someone who looked capable of violence. Jenna, he said quietly, is this true? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. Answer me, Richard said, and there was steel in his voice that I'd never heard before. Dad, is this true? Jenna looked at Marcus desperately, like he might somehow save her from this moment. But Marcus was staring at his hands, clearly having decided that his best strategy was to become invisible. Yes, she whispered finally. The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Richard's face went completely blank, the kind of blank that comes before an explosion. You've been sleeping with your best friend's boyfriend? He said slowly, like he was trying to make sense of a foreign language. Dad, I can explain. For 3 months. It's not what you think. While she trusted you, while she considered you family, Jenna flinched like he'd hit her. Dad, please. Get out, Richard said quietly. What? Get out of this restaurant. Get out of my sight. Get the fuck away from me before I say something I can't take back. I'd never heard Richard curse before. The effect was startling, like watching a teddy bear suddenly grow fangs. Jenna looked at him with shock and growing panic. Dad, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, he said, his voice getting louder. I understand that I raised a selfish, backstabbing little bitch who thinks the world revolves around her. I understand that I've spent 26 years sacrificing everything for someone who repays loyalty with betrayal. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners were staring, some of them pulling out phones to record what was clearly about to become a very public meltdown. Richard, Marcus said weakly, maybe we should all calm down. Don't. Richard turned to him with such fury that Marcus actually leaned back in his chair. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. You've been lying to this woman for 3 months. You've been using my daughter to cheat on your girlfriend? You're a piece of shit, and if you say one more word to me, I'm going to show you exactly what kind of man builds with his hands. The threat was delivered in such a calm, measured tone that it was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. Marcus stood up abruptly. I think we should go. We? I laughed, and it came out sharp and brittle. Oh, honey, there is no we. There hasn't been a we for 3 months. You chose her. Now you get to live with that choice. Look, Marcus said, I know you're upset. Upset? I stood up too, and I could feel every eye in the restaurant on us. Upset is when someone cuts you off in traffic. This is what happens when you discover that your entire life has been a lie. I turned to Jenna, who was still crying silently into her napkin. Did you enjoy it? I asked conversationally. Did you get off on knowing you were fucking someone else's boyfriend? Did it make you feel special? Please stop, she whispered. Did you laugh about me? I continued. When you were together, did you make jokes about poor, stupid, boring me who had no idea what was happening right under her nose? It wasn't like that. What was it like then? Enlighten me. Explain to me how fucking my boyfriend for 3 months while pretending to be my best friend was somehow noble and pure and misunderstood. Jenna looked at her father desperately. Dad, please, you have to understand. I understand, Richard said quietly. I understand that I don't know you at all. I understand that the daughter I thought I raised doesn't exist. The words hit Jenna like physical blows. She doubled over slightly, sobbing harder. 26 years, Richard continued, his voice getting stronger. 26 years of putting you first? Of working extra hours to pay for your dance classes and your college and your car and your apartment? 26 years of turning down dates and social events because you needed something or wanted something or had a crisis that required my immediate attention. Dad, 26 years of believing that family mattered to you, that loyalty mattered, that the values I tried to teach you had actually taken root. He stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. I was wrong. Please don't say that, Jenna begged. Please, I can fix this. How? Richard asked. How do you fix 3 months of lying? How do you fix destroying someone who trusted you? How do you fix betraying the person who considered you a sister? Jenna didn't have an answer for that. None of them did. I need some air, Richard said, and walked toward the exit without looking back. I stood there for a moment, looking down at Marcus and Jenna. They both looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of their own actions. I hope it was worth it, I said finally. I hope 3 months of mediocre sex was worth losing everything else. Marcus flinched. Don't what? I asked. Don't tell the truth? Don't point out that you threw away 3 years for someone who'll probably cheat on you too? Because let's be honest, Marcus, if she'll betray her best friend, what makes you think she'll be faithful to you? The look that passed between Marcus and Jenna told me that particular thought had never occurred to either of them. Beautiful. Have a wonderful life together, I said. You deserve each other. I walked out of the restaurant with my head high and my spine straight, leaving them to deal with the wreckage they'd created. I found Richard in the parking lot, leaning against his car with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked older than he had an hour ago, like the confrontation had aged him in real time. Are you okay? I asked softly. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Am I okay? My daughter has been betraying her best friend for 3 months, and I just found out about it in a public restaurant. I'm not sure okay is the right word. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. Are you? He asked, turning to look at me. Are you really sorry? For a moment, I thought he'd figured it out. I thought he knew that this whole thing had been planned, that I'd orchestrated this evening specifically to hurt Jenna and Marcus in the most devastating way possible. But when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see suspicion. I saw hurt and confusion and something that looked like gratitude. You could have told me privately, he said. You could have spared me the public humiliation. You deserve to know, I said. And you deserve to hear it from someone who cares about you, not from someone trying to manipulate the situation. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did care about him. Maybe not the way he thought I did, but I cared. And he did deserve to know what kind of person his daughter really was. 3 months, he said quietly. 3 months of her lying to me, too. I asked her about this Marcus guy she'd been seeing. I asked if he made her happy. She looked me in the eye and lied. I'm sorry, I said again. He was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the stars barely visible above the city lights. You know what the worst part is? He said finally. What? I'm not surprised. I should be shocked, devastated, blindsided. But I'm not. Deep down, I think I always knew she was capable of this. The admission seemed to hurt him more than the betrayal itself. She's not a bad person, I said carefully. She makes selfish choices. No, Richard said firmly. She is a bad person. Good people don't do this. Good people don't betray the people who love them. Good people don't lie and manipulate and destroy lives for their own gratification. He turned to face me fully. But you're not a bad person, he said. You could have handled this any way you wanted. You could have made it ugly and vindictive. Instead, you gave me the truth, and you gave her a chance to explain herself. If only he knew. I love you, he said suddenly. The words hung between us like a live wire. I stared at him, my carefully planned responses suddenly inadequate. I know it's too soon, he continued quickly. I know we've only been dating for a month, but watching you handle tonight with such grace and dignity, I love you. I love your strength and your loyalty and your capacity for forgiveness. Forgiveness. Right, that's definitely what tonight had been about. Richard, I know you probably need time to process everything that just happened, he said, but I want you to know that I'm here. Whatever you need, however you want to handle this, I'm here. I looked at this good, decent man who'd just watched his daughter reveal herself to be everything he'd tried to raise her not to be. This man who was offering me comfort and support and unconditional love in the aftermath of my own betrayal. This man who had no idea that I'd just used him as a weapon in the most elaborate revenge plot of my adult life. I love you too, I heard myself say, and the terrifying thing was, I wasn't sure if I was lying. We drove back to his house in relative silence, both of us processing the events of the evening in our own ways. Richard kept reaching over to squeeze my hand, like he needed to reassure himself that I was still there, still real, still his. When we got inside, he poured us both drinks. Whiskey, neat, the kind of alcohol you drink when you need to burn away the taste of disappointment. We sat on his couch, my legs curled under me, his arm around my shoulders. What happens now? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I need to figure out what to do about my apartment, my stuff. Marcus has keys to everything. Stay here, Richard said immediately. Stay with me. Richard, I'm serious. He set down his drink and turned to face me. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I don't want you to be alone right now. And honestly, I don't want to be alone either. Looking at him, I realized that this was it. This was the moment where I could end the charade and tell him the truth. I could explain that this had all been an elaborate setup, that I'd orchestrated tonight specifically to destroy his daughter and my ex-boyfriend. I could come clean about my motivations and my methods and let him decide whether he could forgive me for using him. Or I could keep playing the role I'd created. I could move in with him and continue building a relationship based on a lie. I could marry him and become Jenna's stepmother and complete my revenge in the most poetic way possible. "Okay," I said. "Okay? Okay, I'll stay with you." His smile was so bright, so genuinely happy, that it made my chest ache. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and I kissed him back with an enthusiasm that wasn't entirely manufactured. 6 months later, Richard proposed. He did it on a Thursday morning in his kitchen, no fanfare or grand gestures. I was making coffee in one of his old t-shirts, my hair a mess, completely unprepared for life-changing moments. He walked up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist and said, "Marry me," just like that. Simple and perfect and completely him. I said yes before I'd consciously decided to say anything at all. The ring was beautiful, a vintage setting with a stone that caught the morning light and threw it around the kitchen in tiny rainbows. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for my finger. "I bought it 3 months ago," Richard admitted as he slipped it onto my hand. "I've been carrying it around waiting for the right moment." "This is the right moment," I said and meant it. We decided on a small wedding, just immediate family and close friends. Richard didn't have much family, a brother in California, a few cousins scattered around the country. I had my parents, who were thrilled that I'd found someone who made me so obviously happy. Jenna was not invited. Richard hadn't spoken to his daughter since the night at Meridian 6 months earlier. She'd tried calling, texting, showing up at his office. She'd sent letters and emails and even tried going through his brother to get him to talk to her. He'd ignored all of it. She made her choice, he said when I suggested that maybe he should give her a chance to apologize. She chose herself over everyone else. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I didn't push the issue. After all, estrangement from his daughter was part of my revenge plan. The fact that it was also breaking Richard's heart was just collateral damage. The wedding was perfect. Small and intimate and everything a wedding should be. Richard cried when he saw me in my dress. I cried when he said his vows. Our families cried because we were so obviously happy. And we were happy. That was the strangest part of all of this. Somewhere between the elaborate revenge plot and the fake relationship and the manufactured intimacy, real feelings had developed. Real love, real partnership, real joy. I'd married Richard to hurt his daughter, but I'd ended up marrying him because I genuinely wanted to spend my life with him. The fact that it also made me Jenna's stepmother was just the cherry on top of the revenge sundae. Marcus and Jenna had lasted exactly 3 months after the night at Meridian. Apparently, when the excitement of forbidden love wore off and they were left with just each other, they realized they had nothing in common except a mutual willingness to betray people who trusted them. Marcus tried to contact me after their breakup. A series of increasingly desperate texts about how sorry he was, how he'd made a mistake, how he wanted to work things out. I sent him a photo of my engagement ring and blocked his number. Jenna found out about the engagement through social media, like everyone else. Richard had posted a photo of us at dinner, my left hand prominently displayed, with a caption about how lucky he was to have found his person. She called me that night. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "You married my dad," she said without preamble. Her voice sounded hollow, defeated. "I did. To hurt me. I married your dad because I love him," I said. "The fact that it hurts you is just a bonus. You planned this whole thing. From the beginning, you targeted him. Your dad is a good man who deserved better than a daughter who treats him like shit," I said. "I'm giving him better. You used him. You fucked my boyfriend," I replied. "For 3 months. While pretending to be my friend. I'd say we're even." There was a long silence. "I miss him," she said finally. "I miss my dad." "You should have thought of that before you decided that getting laid was more important than loyalty." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected. "A series of choices. Over and over again for 3 months you chose to betray me. Now you get to live with the consequences." He won't even talk to me. Good. Another silence. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "It's worth nothing," I said. "But thanks for playing." I hung up and blocked her number too. 3 weeks later, Richard and I were officially Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. I'd gone from being Jenna's best friend to being her stepmother, from being Marcus's girlfriend to being the wife of a man who actually deserved me. The revenge was complete and it was perfect.